everybody. This is Teen Title Talk with Erin.
And Liz.
This is the podcast
where two librarians discuss two YA books every 2 weeks.
Today we'll be talking about the books Black Enough, edited by Ziboi,
and Fresh Ink, edited by Lamar Giles.
Before we do that, we need to get in touch with our teen selves. So
joy.
I know. And Liz has a terrible cold. She doesn't always sound like this if you've listened to our previous podcasts. All right. So into the Jar of Teen Angst. First question, Liz, is what big world issues were you worried about back in the day?
I always would consider myself to be fairly worldly, having parents who were kind of plugged into the news. I remember, when I was a kid, being kind of worried about nuclear war. Mm-hmm. I was an anxious child. But in my teen years,
It's stressful.
I started to get, as I started to get into, women's rights, I started to get really into reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights as well. Anyone who knows me knows that hasn't changed.
Right, exactly. I was going to say that. Not much has changed.
I know, and in so many ways, both with me and the fact that people are still arguing about, hey, can a person have the right to live their own life and privately? I don't know. We need to talk about it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking, and I was like, well, what besides? I mean, I grew up in rural Vermont, so one huge focus when you're in rural Vermont is a focus on environmental issues. So that was definitely a big world issue that I was focused on. But also, I remember HIV and AIDS being a big talking point all the time. And
did you learn about it from Rent as well? Because,
no, because I was before, because I'm a little older than you. So it was leading up to Rent. Of course, Rent was huge when I was in high school. I went to see Rent on Broadway. And so that was part of it. But I definitely remember those two big things.
I mean, I knew what it was beforehand. I had a nurse for a mother.
Sure.
So we knew what things were. But I do remember what made it a big thing in high school was just Rent being very popular with the youngins.
Yes. All right, next question. What kind of student were you?
I really liked learning. I always loved to read, but I was bullied a lot in middle school, and I think I don't want to say I gave up, but I really think I did kind of check out. I was like, I hate Longmeadow. I hate this place. I want to get out of here. If there was a class, it kind of came down to, especially in high school, once I didn't have to see my old bullies all the time, it was a little bit better. And if there was a class that really interested me, I would go all in.
Yeah.
But there were just a lot of classes where I'm like, I don't care. I'm just biding time to get to college, which I excelled at.
Right, exactly. That's interesting. Me too.
Luckily there were curricula, there were teachers in high school that challenged me. My history professor, Miss Snyder, and Mr. Fitz, who was a history teacher, but he taught the mass media course senior year. Those were particularly two teachers who not only had challenging curriculums, but kind of saw that I was coasting, and they both in their own ways told me, I know you can do better, and I expect you to do better.
And those are the good teachers.
Those are the best teachers.
I excelled in college. I hated high school. I liked high school. I hated school. I hated school since I was in second grade, though. I had a bad relationship to it right away.
See, I'm a weirdo. I was like, school is great.
School is great. I think I liked playing school at home when I was really little, and then I just didn't like real school. Basically, I didn't do well until after high school, and I was pursuing my own things, and I was I realized how I learned, which is that I'm not a great listener, and I don't do well in lectures. I should have realized that earlier, because that was half the battle, was that I was constantly zoning out. But then once I realized that, I was able to learn better, because I would just constantly doodle and take notes, and if my hand was moving, I was listening. And then all of a sudden, it changed everything. I can learn anything. This is great. And so I excelled in college and in my MFA. But as a high school student, I was just not a good student at all.
High school is also just, I think, a terrible time. People who look back fondly on high school as the best years of their lives, I think they're pod people. Avoid them immediately. Avoid them.
It's a tough, uncomfortable, growing time, I think.
It is.
It can be.
Maybe we just shouldn't have school around this time. It's like everyone just go do your
home.
Do your own thing for 4 years.
Exactly. All right, and we have one library life question. So this is a great one. What are the best and worst parts of your job?
Best parts? The feeling that you're able to make a difference, be it helping someone out or introducing them to a new item, a new perspective. I know it's not making a difference on a global level, but there are some people who come in who the fact that you help them with one small thing really does change their whole
Oh, yeah. It changes
whole
their
day.
world. Yeah.
exactly. Or just a kid coming in. There was someone who came in looking for a book, and I was able to say, Long Ung's First They Killed My Father. That's her memoir of surviving the Cambodian genocide. I don't even know if they teach that in schools.
Right.
The only reason I learned about it in high school was because of Miss Snyder.
Right.
So the fact that I'm like, hey, this person's probably learning about something they'd never heard of before. Like, for
Right.
me, I'm like, that is such a good feeling.
I know. I totally agree. How about worst?
Creepers.
No, not at the library.
Oh, no. Although this is found in all public-facing service jobs. They mistake your politeness and your helpfulness, which is your job, for actual personal interest. Which, no, I've had men who are old enough to be my father ask me out on dates. And I take personal offense to that. I am not at this desk to look for anybody. I am at my job.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You wouldn't go up to a firefighter and ask them out.
Maybe you would. I don't know. Some people have no boundaries about that.
And I think there's a stereotype that comes with being a librarian of like spinsterness. So I think some people go like, oh yeah, she's obviously just waiting for some. I'm like, nope, I'm taken.
Yeah, exactly.
No, thank you.
Well, I totally agree about the creepers, but I was thinking of another really rough one is when like a patron comes in and they're already having a terrible day and whatever happens and you are the nearest person to lash out at and it can be really personal and abrasive, and I get that like everyone has their moments, but it doesn't feel good to be on the other end of that. It's brutal sometimes.
And I know I've been, I try to keep it in check, but every now and then I've been kind of the person where it's just, you kind of snap a little and then you're like, I'm sorry, I've just been having a bad day.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard not to snap back also when someone's snapping at you. So you're like, okay, check your temper, Erin.
Just squeeze the fingernails right into your palm.
Exactly. And for me, best part, I'd definitely say would be working with teens, doing creative projects with teens, finding books for teens. Today we're making marbled mugs, marbled ceramic mugs. It's just fun to do creative projects. And I love that part of my job where I get to set up programming and plan.
Yeah.
So that's a really good time. All right, so that wasn't that bad.
Slightly painless.
Yep, exactly. Let's move on to books. What did you read this time around? Tell us a little about it.
So I read the anthology Fresh Ink. It is an anthology of short stories by diverse authors, i.e., non-white, non-cis, non-het authors. It's published in part with the organization We Need Diverse Books.
Awesome. And I read Black Enough, Stories of Being Young and Black in America, and I just love the quick description it says inside this one. It says Black is urban and rural, wealthy and poor, mixed race, immigrants, and more, because there are countless ways to be Black enough.
Yep.
And that's totally this book. So I'm excited to talk about it, but let's talk about yours first.
Yes.
So there are a lot of amazing voices in that book, I noticed. I saw them all on the cover. Great writers, New York Times bestsellers. It's pitched as a collection of short fiction by diverse voices. Kirk has called it quintessentially American. Is the book talking about the American experience? And if not, what were some common themes that tied the whole book together?
I mean, I think it is because it's talking about everyday things that happen. Cooking, gaming, going to comic conventions, sports competition. So yes, that is all quintessentially American. The theme I found was these are kids who are kind of trying to find their space. In a world that wasn't exactly made for them. One of the stories, let me get the title. I actually just read it this morning. Catchpole Drive is about a young trans male on a swimming team and just trying to make a space for himself.
Gotcha.
In that
world
where it is not cut out for someone who's trans masculine. He has to have top surgery in order to be able to swim shirtless.
Right.
He still has to wear a one-piece bathing suit that was initially made for, women.
I got it. Okay.
And that makes him uncomfortable. And so it's kind of people trying to eke out a space in a world that, America was ultimately built for able-bodied, cis, hetero, white dudes.
Right, exactly.
And I think usually when people talk about racism and discrimination, we think of the very overt examples like slurs.
Okay.
And in other cases, we'll dismiss it as character flaws rather than something systemic, and we rarely think of racism as being, hey, I really see stories where someone who isn't white isn't the lead character.
Right, exactly.
And I think sometimes that makes people even more uncomfortable than talking about, like, the ye old bad days, because then it's like, oh no, I might be implicated.
Right, exactly.
This makes me
Feels
uncomfortable.
So it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Talking about social structure is hard.
It is. What was your favorite story? Why'd you like it?
Actually, I just read the catch pull release might be, all right, I don't think that was the title. Sorry, I'm thinking of fishing. I just read it this morning. Catch Pull Drive, I think, might be my favorite. I actually used to be on swim team back when I was like 10, so definitely brought back some memories. And it was just, I think, a very relatable story of just trying to be comfortable in your own skin. And it had a lot of soul to it.
Okay, gotcha.
You just felt yourself rooting for Tommy the whole time. Like, the other one I loved was Meet Cute by Melinda Lowe. I mean, obviously,
I like Melinda Lowe a lot. She always is really interesting to read.
I'm a sucker for Comic-Con stories. Actually, just got back from Anime Boston. It's a very adorable story of two girls, one doing a race bent, Dana Scully, so she's black, being black Dana Scully, and the other being a gender swap Sulu. I actually did a gender swap costume this year. So I would, basically gender swap is you are, if you're, let's say the character I went to is male canonly. I just did a feminine version of that.
Got it. Okay. Yes.
So I did that myself. The girls meet at a con, the power goes out, and they have a little meet cute adventure, and it ends with them swapping numbers. It is precious. And again, I'm rooting for these girls. I'm like, you two go out and have a wholesome date.
This one spoke to your heart, it sounds
It really did.
How about, the swim team one does sound like it was tough to read. Were there any other ones that were tough or just really pulled your heartstrings?
Yeah. Tags by Walter Dean Myers was hard. It's written as a play, and I still remember reading Monster when I was young.
Everybody.
And so it's 4 boys who are trying to express themselves via their graffiti, which is, their tags. Which is, the more I learn about tags and tag culture, the more I hate when people just dismiss it as vandalism. No, it's art. And in many cases, it's being put up on things that they're just sitting there anyway. Why do you care if someone decides to dress it up a bit? It just gets progressively more project. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a gut punch by the time you get to the end of the story.
Gotcha. All right. Well, if you could have a whole novel based on one character in one of the stories, which one would it be?
Probably Meet Cute. I would like
little rom-com.
Just more of those precious nerd girls doing adorable things, especially because recently there has been so much talk and needed discussion about the toxicity of nerd culture, be it people, if you heard about and some of these are, I don't want to say real fans because some of them are, but there is, especially on social media, the troll culture where they'll just pick out someone and go after them. But
it's a mob.
Kelly Marie Tran being bullied off of Instagram. And, let's not forget the whole Gamergate, Anita Sarkeesian getting, and Zoe Quinn getting threats on their life. Threats on their life.
Yep.
And again, it's needed. We do need to talk about the toxicity of nerd culture. There are some...
And it's ongoing. Why? Can we get over this?
Yeah, there are some guys who I think just really don't want to let their imagined hold on nerd culture, because I'm no, nerd culture has never been...
No, never.
...completely... Guys like my mom saw Star Wars in 1977. Star Wars has always been for everybody.
Right.
But it was just very nice to read a story about nerd culture that wasn't full of angst, that wasn't full of vitriol, that was just about 2 people who love something and they're like, hey, you're another nerd, let's hang out.
Yeah.
Because when I go to cons, that is for the most part what I see.
I'm
it's
sure
people celebrating what they love and saying, hey, you like this thing too, come join the fun, not get out of here, you've only liked it for a year, whereas I've liked it for 5.
And has con culture changed at all? You think it's kind of an answer to something, or has it always been that way? Because you've gone for a long time.
From what I have seen, con culture has always, and again, this is my experience, and I have heard that there's people who it hasn't always been as welcoming to
as well.
Yeah, but I have always found that con culture strives to be, hey, if you're into this, come on in.
Yeah. Welcoming.
Yeah, welcoming. The more in the party, the better, because a lot of people my age remember being the outcast nerds. So we're like, wait, people like our stuff now? Please come join us.
Exactly.
Like, I'm one of the types that's happy that when like Wonder Woman and the Avengers are topping the box office, because it's like, finally, everyone sees what I see.
It's fun.
Exactly. So it is nice that someone highlighted the more welcoming,
Right.
the welcoming aspects of nerd culture, which I think a majority of it really tries to be.
Right. Gotcha.
It's just the toxic elements are really loud.
How about read alikes? If a reader loved Fresh Ink, what else might they be into? It doesn't have to be YA.
Yes, because I am not.
I know you're not
too
the
into
YA
the
library.
YA. I'm not the YA. I'm not in the YA short essay scene. If you want something kind of similar, there are some great graphic novel compilations. Chainmail Bikini is assorted stories by female and femme gamers.
Cool.
There's APB, which is I did APB. Artists Against Police Brutality. There was Comics for Choice, if you want to get a little more political. And one that I ordered for our collection, it was Spanish Fever, which is a collection of Spanish cartoonists. So, and I think, what was their one? In the wake of the Pulse shooting, there was, a lot of LGBT, a little LGBT comic anthology.
Absolutely.
So a lot of stuff you can find in the graphic novel world.
Nice. That's great. Alrighty. Let's talk about Black Enough. What do you have for me?
Alrighty. So obviously, we're both white.
Right. There is that.
When did you start actively seeking out stories that were centered on people who didn't look like you?
I struggle with this one because I'm like, God, when did I? It was late. I think in high school I was reading a lot of classics, and then I had this one thing where I got really interested in Irish history. So I was doing the opposite. I was reading a lot of Irish history, epic poetry, old white man stuff. When I went into Miss Stahl's class, she was one of my favorite teachers who really required us to be very serious. We read House on Mango Street, and I think that was probably a turning point for me. I also read a lot of fantasy, so. But House on Mango Street, then I found Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston. So still in a historical sense, I was reading non-white. But then I eventually found Monster, but I want to say that was in college.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think you started earlier than me. I don't think I really started making a concerted effort until I was in my 20s. I mean, when I was a teenage weeaboo, which is it's a term for anime fans.
Okay, gotcha.
I did try to seek out Chinese and Japanese authors.
Okay, gotcha.
I knew of Walter Dean Myers and a few. I definitely, I grew up in Longmeadow. I mean, when I was younger, I grew up in the South, which actually was a lot more diverse than Longmeadow, Massachusetts.
Well, in Vermont, where I grew up. And so that's also what was around me, what could I find, and what the library curated versus what was being published. So there's all that to consider. I mean, I think we have a lot more going for us now. I'm curating material for the teen section. So yeah, it was late.
So piggybacking off of this, what was the first story you remember reading where the protagonist was not white, and what effect did that have on you?
So I remember Maniac McGee being read aloud, and that's a first, even though Maniac McGee is white, secondary character is black. It completely flew over my head. But I was 7. Well, it was being read aloud to me. It's not a holier than thou, I don't see race type comment. It's literally, I didn't notice it. What I loved about that book was these two people from different backgrounds found common ground, and it was just a lovely story. I loved it. I didn't understand all of it, for sure. I missed a lot of the racial tension in the book. Yeah. It totally flew over my head. When I was in 4th grade, I remember finding slave narratives and being horrified, but also interested. And so I read that, but I don't think I read a lot of modern stories about anyone who was not white until much later. But again, it's what was available at the time. So, but, that's all. I just don't have memories of having much available to me. Yeah,
I kind of remember, when I was a kid, Addie from American Girl, and that was
That's
kind
true.
of it.
And Kirsten was mine, so I had Kirsten, and I think we each got only the books that we got. So I don't think I sought many of those out at the library.
Although I don't think the woman who wrote the Addie books. I'd have to double check. I think she was white, but
no, I don't think she was.
Oh,
Okay. Was she? I don't think she was.
Go back to
I don't know. We'll have to look. We'll fact check that.
But to that book's credit, that was a series that did not, I think, shy away from the realities of that time.
Right.
Which would be very easy for a children's book to do. So.
No, I think it could gloss over things very easily, but it didn't, which that's good.
Kind of similar to the one you asked me. What was your favorite story and why?
So Lamar Giles, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, he geeked out. It was just this great story about this kid who sees the girl that he likes like at the mall, and he's wearing this Chewbacca shirt, and he knows she's not really into the geek culture, and he doesn't know if he should talk to her. And then he kind of does, but there's this other photo booth guy that kind of gets in the way, and then there's this big drama that happens at the end. So eventually he does connect with her, but I just thought the dialogue was amazing, and the drama was there. It was really well written. I just loved it.
And everyone loves Star Wars, boy.
And I had a soft spot for the Chewbacca shirt. The other one I loved was Rita Williams Garcia's. I actually I met her at Vermont College of Fine Arts. She's an amazing, amazing author. She wrote this one called Whoa. And it's about a boy who's prepping for a modeling gig, and he actually steams his face in his great-grandma's basin. He's like throws rosemary into it, and he's steaming his face. And he looks into the basin, and he sees a boy. And that boy is from the 1800s. He's a slave boy, and they start talking to each other. And the boy thinks he's a demon. And all these miscommunications are firing back and forth as they talk to each other. And it's just really, really an interesting story. And again, Rita's writing is amazing. So that put it up a level for me.
Yeah. And what story kind of stuck with you the most?
I mean, those ones definitely did. I also, though, Danielle Clayton's, it hit me at the end because it was called The Trouble Was Drowning. And it was a story about a girl going to this like debutante ball thing, which is totally foreign to me. I have not ever done anything like that, being from Vermont.
I lived in the South. I still don't know what it is.
But in this town, there's been these people being pulled from the river, and I don't want to spoil the ending, so I'm not gonna tell you what happens. But the ending was what like made it really stick with me. There was a surprise that I didn't really see clearly coming, and then I was like, oh. So I know I'm being kind of obscure, but you just have to read it. So that one was The Trouble Was Drowning.
Okay. So last question. Why do you think it's important for everyone to read stories and narratives by people of color?
Well, I mean, obviously because perspective's valuable, and reading is one of the best ways to gain perspective, I think. I mean, that's obviously biased because I'm a writer and a reader, right? I also think from an agnostic approach, you just don't know what you don't know. So by reading across identities and experiences, it breaks down assumptions. I always say story immersion is an empathetic endeavor. I know different kinds of story immersion are all empathetic endeavors. And I think when you read a story, it's just about the closest you can get to simulating the experience of another person. Sometimes maybe you come at the experience making an assumption about what the story will entail, but that's not necessarily how it plays out. And it forces you to come to terms with someone else's humanity. The author, or the editor, Ziboi, she writes in the beginning about how she was always told she wasn't Black enough. And so obviously people had preconceived notions about what she should do or not be doing, or how she should be acting, or what she should be wearing, or how she should be, presenting herself. I think when you read a story and step into the shoes of each of these characters, you come to realize the full depth of each person. And it doesn't look the same. Like, all of the people in this book are different. Each story is different. So, my hope is that after reading more and more perspectives, this understanding of humanity, depth, breadth, and variation, connection points across identity markers, eventually carries out into the world. Maybe even giving more of an ability for people to approach one another as individuals instead of as,
well, that's
you're
similar
this
to why
and I'm that.
Representation in film and television is important as well.
Also, if you're only reading within your identity, are you a little bored and stagnant? I mean, honestly, come on.
I mean, what do we have? Shopaholics? I mean, I need something else.
Exactly. So, all right, what up? I am thinking, what's up next? You don't know, but I do. I'll be reading Voices by David Eliot. Courtney will be back reading The White Rose by Kip Wilson. Both of those are novels in verse. So
Sort of like, what was it? I just read Lori Hell Sanderson's Shout, which was
exactly,
okay, so
yeah.
memoir of
Yep,
course.
exactly. So, all right, that does it for us. Remember, if you get a chance to answer our 2 questions today from the Jar of Teen Angst, those are, what big world issues were you worried about back in the day?
What kind of student were you?
Likewise, if you have any questions about reading recommendations or library life, please write to us at teentitletalk@gmail.com, and we'll read a few of our listener responses next time.
Thanks for joining us on Teen Title Talk. This podcast is brought to you by Derry Public Library and Derry Community Access Media, empowering independent voices. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Google Play, and Player FM. Just search for Teen Title Talk. Don't forget, hit follow so you can hear the latest episode. Our theme was created and performed by Bandit Starling. Until next time,
Bye.